Good afternoon, everyone. The Honorable Head of the Health Behavior, Environment, and Social Medicine Department, Universitas Gadjah Mada, Profesor Dr. Anda Yayi Suryo Prabandari, Magister Sains, Doctor of Philosophy. The Honorable Ari Prayogo Pribadi, Doctor of Philosophy, Lecturer in Health Behavior, Environment, and Social Medicine Department. The Honorable Dr. Ian Madway from Environmental Research Group, Imperial College London, and also the participant, all ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wednesday webinar by the Public Health Program, Universitas Gadjah Mada. And my name is Aini Aziza, and I will be your host for today. The topic of today's webinar is Insight and Strategies for Managing Urban Air Pollution. And before we start, I would like to remind you to please use your real name, not an alias or the device name. And also, please fill in the attendance form that will be available in the chat box later. And if you have any question, please write down your question in the chat box. And also, don't forget to write your name. And now on to the next agenda. We are now going to listen to the opening remark by the Head of Health Behavior, Environment, and Social Medicine Department, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Dr. Anda Yayi Suryo Prabandari, Magister Sains, Doctor of Philosophy.
Thank you, Mbak Aini.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Aini, for giving me a chance. And first of all, I'm sorry I'm on the in the middle of the lecture too, so I use my mobile. For this occasion, first of all, I would like to thank for all the presenters, especially Dr. Ian Madway from Environmental Research Group, Imperial College of London, for being our presenter today, and as well as Dr. Prayogo Pribadi. Yeah, both of them will discuss about the Dr. Ian will talking about environmental research. Talking about the health effect of the air pollution and clean air solution for the urban area. And then Dr. Ari will talk about understanding of the air pollution problem and health. And we also thank for all participants who attend this webinar today, that we should help in the middle of afternoon, yeah, because of our time difference. But again, I would like to thank on behalf of the Department of Health Behavior, Environment, and Social Medicine for Dr. Ian Madway, yeah, to for having and make time, yeah, to giving us some experience and knowledge in the air pollution and clean air solution. That's Indonesia has many problem about this one, yeah, since we actually already have for transportation, yeah, but yeah, the pollution is still our problem, especially in the big cities. And Universitas Gadjah Mada at the moment also already become the health promoting university. And one of our activity actually is also we would like to have a clean and healthy air and environment and surrounding our campus. Yeah, we are trying to get there. But again, thank you for making that you can have time to share with us, and as well as Mas Ari, Dr. Ari Prayogo. And I also thanks to Dr. Anissa Utami for being moderator today. Yeah, and I also would like to thank for all the committee, and we apologize if any thing that not meet your expectation today. But I hope what the presenters will share today will give you fruitful knowledge about the pollution, air pollution especially, and then we can do a better, I hope, a better intervention or at least advocacy to the government for making our environment being clean and healthy. Thank you very much and enjoy the webinar. And I give back my screen to Mbak Ain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Yayi, for your warm opening remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to our main agenda, that is the presentation and the discussion from all the from Dr. Ayan and also Mr. Ari. And from now on, all presentation and discussion will be moderated by our moderator, Dr. Anissa Utamirauf. Dr. Anissa, please, time's yours.
Okay, thank you so much Mbak Aini and also Prof. Yayi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang Bapak Ibu, teman-teman semuanya. Semoga dalam keadaan sehat dan bahagia. So today, Ms. Anissa and I'll be your moderators for today's discussion in our seminar Rabuan yang diadakan oleh our Departemen Perilaku Kesehatan, Lingkungan dan Kedokteran Sosial FKKMK Universitas Gadjah Mada. Our topic for today is insight and strategies for managing air pollutions. So this tema is really relevant and interesting, not only for the environmentalists, experts, and also the researchers, but also for the people in the general, because the impact of our pollutions not only affect the individuals, but also regional and also the global populations. So for today, the discussions will be held bilingual, so Bapak diperkenankan untuk bertanya serta memberi saran, komentar, ataupun memberi masukan kepada kedua narasumber setelah presentasi dilakukan oleh kedua narasumber. So we are honored to have two distinguished experts in the field of air pollution and its negative impact. As our speaker for today, we have Bapak Ari Prayogo Pribadi PhD and Dr. Ayan Stanley Madwi. Thank you so much for accepting our invitations to be our speakers, and we are truly honored to have you with us today, and we look forward for your enlightening presentations. So for the first, I will go for the first speaker. So saya akan membacakan CV singkat dari Bapak Ari Prayogo Pribadi PhD. So he finished his PhD in Environmental Research Science in King College London in 2021, and his area of expertise is air pollutions, industrial engineering, focusing on work design and ergonomic, and also health and safety engineering and environment. He also have several accomplishments. First is he's an awardee in Asian World Bank's scholarship and also LPDP held by Ministry of Finance of Republic of Indonesia. He also the delegate for WHO conference that held in Paris, France, and he have several work experience. First is he's a graduate management trainee and PT United Tractors in 2011, and he is the head of spare part warehouse in PT Astra Honda Motor in 2013. He is also involved in expert team of health and safety environment in Sumbawa Technopark in Indonesia. And also, as we know, he is a lecturer in Department of Health, Behavior, Environment, and Social Medicine FKKMK Universitas Gadjah Mada. So without any further ado, we are pleased to welcome our first speaker, Bapak Ari Prayogo Pribadi PhD, that will talk about understanding air pollution problems and health. Pada Pak Ari, dipersilakan. Monggo Pak Ari.
Okay, thank you Anissa, thank you Mbak Aini. I would like to say thank you to our head of department, Mrs. Yayi Prabandari, for opening this webinar. And then I would like to say thank you to Ian for joining us today and then accepting the invitation and then for sharing the knowledge regarding the air pollution. He is my former supervisor and then also lectures during my PhD at King's College London. And then Ian currently moved together with the Imperial College London, with the ARG group to Imperial College London. And then I would like to say thank you to all of the participants who are joining today. Hopefully you can get more knowledge regarding the air pollution from the experts. And then maybe Anissa also will talk regarding the air pollution at the end of my presentation and then give more some insight regarding the air pollution and understanding the problem in Indonesia as well. First, I would like to share my presentation. Okay, for your information, I will talk in two languages, and then Ian, if you don't mind, we will discuss, give some presentation in bilingual. I will talk in Indonesian, I will talk in English at the same time, maybe, and then we encourage all of the students and then all of my colleagues in this event and this occasion can talk in Indonesia, or maybe you can talk in English. If you have any further question, just put in the chat box. You can chat it in Indonesia or maybe chat in English. Okay. Hopefully you can see my presentation. Okay. I will start about the understanding the air pollution problem and health. We know that not all of Indonesian people has more information regarding the air pollution. So I will share what is the air pollution, what is from the sources, and then what the effect to our health. But the effect for our health may be Ian will talk deeper than me because his expertise is more deeper in the health effects and toxicology and etc. Hopefully the screen is okay. You can see on the screen for the all participants. Okay, it's not moving. Okay. Is still not moving? Okay. Okay, wait for the minute. Tunggu sebentar, saya coba share. Sebentar ya.
Oke, sementara Pak Ari sedang memperbaiki technical issues, jadi hari ini diharapkan teman-teman dapat punya 3 poin utama yang bisa teman-teman dapat ambil. Yang pertama tentu saja identify the source of air pollutions atau indoor and air pollutions, kemudian understand the regulations karena beberapa regulasi mungkin belum terlalu terdengar, padahal kita adalah sebagai orang-orang yang berkecimpung di dunia kesehatan, kita juga butuh regulasi yang kuat sehingga nantinya beberapa keputusan ataupun beberapa strategis itu dapat didukung oleh seluruh pihak. Kemudian teman-teman juga diharapkan dapat mengetahui strategi yang efektif untuk mencegah air pollution, tidak hanya dari upaya preventif secara individual seperti menggunakan masker, tapi juga beberapa rekayasa lingkungan seperti penanaman pohon dan lain-lain. It can be. Baik, Pak Ari. Oke.
Okay. I will apologize for the technical issue for my laptop. Okay, I will talk about the understanding and the air pollution problem and health. First, we need to know about what is the air pollution. Air pollution is caused by a combination harmful, but it emits by human activities, so it comes from the nature as well. But the air pollution is caused by a combination of solid particles and gases in the air. Currently, in the developing countries and also for the developed countries, the pollutants generated by the emission of fuel, dust, and chemicals from the industry and other sources. Some pollutants, if you inhale directly, it will expose, get into your lung, and then it will affect to your lung function for the period of time. So yeah, the air pollution is really dangerous because it's a main issue not only in the developing countries but also in developed countries. And then we tackle together. Currently, it's not only Indonesia, maybe in the Southeast Asian countries, and then also for some countries in different continents. Okay, based from the WHO, the pollution is the major environmental health risk, and this is the single biggest environmental threat to the human health worldwide. Based on the WHO, it estimated 4.2 million and also 3.8 million premature deaths that it's coming from the outdoor air pollution and also the indoor air pollution. We have two different types of the classification of the air pollution. Some of you maybe just knows regarding the air pollution is coming from the outdoor, but nowadays indoor air pollution also threat the human being, and then also one of the biggest health risks as well coming from the indoor air pollution. The outdoor air pollution is mixed of various pollutants that's coming from the natures, and then it's coming from the human activity itself. Burning fuels, releases gases, and then the vehicles, transportation, and also from the industrial. And then from the indoor air pollution is basically coming from the household activities like cooking, and also coming from the mosquito incense. In our country, in Indonesia, we're still using the mosquito incense, and then also the aerosol spray too, and then also coming from the smoking as well. Based from the National Health Medical Research Council, the indoor air pollution defines as the air that in a building that occupied by a group with varying health level for at least an hours. The outdoor air pollutants, like I previously mentioned, these pollutants can be emitted by the human activities or also coming from the natural activities. But from the human activities, it's emitted by the vehicles, industrial activities. From the power plants, we know that in Indonesia, the power plants still generate by the coal, because the coal is the mainly source to generate our electricity in Indonesia. Coming from the incinerators, we still have a problem with our management for the waste treatment, and also coming from the airplanes, but maybe in some areas, not only, yeah, I think it will affect in the urban areas. But we have to we keep in mind that the air pollution is also influenced by the meteorological condition. We have to see about the wind speed, about the seasonal, that will affect the dispersion of the air pollution itself. Okay, the indoor pollution, as I mentioned before, is coming from the household activities, coming from the cooking, heating. I think heating is only for the countries that it has 4 seasons, but in Indonesia we only have 2 seasons, so we use a heater to warming up our ambient. It's coming from the household activities like cooking. That is really common. Example, during my research for my PhD in 2017 until 2018, it showed that the indoor air pollution also contribute to the level of the PM 2.5 during my PhD. So it shows that the indoor air pollution has significant impact also for the health problems, not only for the outdoor activities, but we have to remind that indoor air pollution as well have a biggest impact. And then this is the categories of air pollution. You know that air pollution coming from the traffic in Indonesia, some of the major cities, like mega cities like Jakarta, like Bandung, Surabaya, they have more vehicles. So the more vehicles that emit a lot of significant amounts of the particles, the air, for the particulate matters, for the PM 2.5, for the PM10s or ultrafines, and then also the gases, and then the toxic gases maybe we will release into the air. But also we have to keep in mind, but Indonesia is one of the biggest producer. We are biggest industrial countries. So we produce a lot of stuff from Indonesia, like transportation maybe, and then a lot of industry that located in Java. So we are so in Java. We have a lot of activities. So they will contribute the air condition in Indonesia. And then also, like I previously mentioned, the domestic fuel burning, like household activities, it will also affect to our health, and it will affect to air pollution condition in Indonesia. Some of them, I found that my research during my PhD, I found a lot of people still using wood to cooking, and they still use because maybe like tradition or something that makes food more tasty. So I think we cannot close our eyes because our country still keep our tradition in high position, and also coming from the natural sources. Dust you can find everywhere. Dust is characterized elements you can find everywhere. So this is the main categories of air pollution, and this is one of the sources as well. And then we have a lot of type. We have so many type of the air pollution, but in this occasion, I only talk about the particulate matters. Maybe Anissa will talk more about the gases. Maybe she is one of the expert of the air pollution as well. Maybe she will add more, and then add more knowledge regarding the air pollution. The particulate matters we can see on the right hand side of the pictures that the human hair with the diameter between 50 until 70 microns. If you compare with the fine beach sands, you can find in the coastal area in Indonesia, the diameter is 90 microns. If we compare with the PM 2.5 size, the PM 2.5 is particulate matter with the size 2.5 microns, and then the PM10 is particulate matter size 10 microns. You can see that the PM 2.5 is until maybe 20 times smaller if you compare with the human hair and fine beach. So you can imagine that the PM 2.5, when you inhale directly and then you enter your lung, and then it will deposit into your lung until the several period of time. So it will dangerous into your health effects. And then this is some of the sources. I'm just separating the two, the primary and the secondary. And the primary may be coming from the natural activities like the forest fire, the wood stove, and then the secondary coming from the human activities, maybe coming from the industrial, maybe coming from the vehicles, and then maybe coming from the more like burning biomass or something. Yeah. And then okay, the major source of the particulate matters in developing countries. Maybe it's a bit different if you compare with developed countries. Developed countries maybe in the past maybe they struggling regarding the air pollution, but currently they just maintain how to make the air more cleaner. And then I think is it the same in our condition nowadays? Major sources in Indonesia maybe is come from the vehicles, coming from the power generation. Like I previously mentioned, more of the electricity and the power generation is still generated using coal. And industrial sources also emit a lot of air pollution to the air. And the secondary pollutants is like a reaction from the primary sources and then reaction in the air, and then makes more dangerous into our health. My research in 2017 and 2018 in the west part of Java, close to the area of the industrial, show that the filters that are collected from the elementary student, it shows that the heavy metals is quite significant high. But when I trace the elements, like I'm focusing to the trace metals, it found it's not coming from the industrial. It shocked my research and then my hypothesis, because it shows that the filter shows that it's coming from the vehicles. It shows that all of the elementary school is located in front of the major road. That the transportation may be from the lorry, from the cars, they emit more pollutants. This is the characteristic of the PM. I'm just found the table from Kim. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the sources on the right hand side, but the sources is from Kim. This is the characteristic of the fine particles, the PM 2.5, and the coarse particle for the PM10. If you can see for the PM 2.5, the size is less than 2.5 microns, and it will contain the heavy metals. And then the sources coming from the combustion coal, from the transportation, and then a lot of industrial activities. And for the lifetimes, for the PM2.5 is days up to weeks. And the travel distance in the radius 100 under 1,000. It depends on the meteorological condition in the place that you will take a sample. And then for the PM10, less than 10 PM. And then it also contains of the heavy metals as well. And then it's coming from the natural for the human activity. But the travel distance is maybe just less than 1 up to 10 because it's heavier if you compare with the PM2.5. This you can see on the right hand side that a grain of table salt. I think everyone have the salt at your house, and then if you compare the PM10 and you compare with the PM2.5, the size is many times smaller if you compare with the salt. So you can imagine when you inhale directly the PM2.5 inhaled and then you deposit into your lung, and then will stay in period of time. Maybe it will reduce your lung function, and then it will affect to your health to the next future. Yeah, and this is the same, the effect of particulate matter. If you just inhale, maybe your lung, and then I think a lot of health effect regarding the health, getting the problem from the air pollution. And then why does the particle pollution increase the risk of health? You can see on the right, when you inhale the PM2.5 directly, it will enter into your airways, and it will stay in your lung for a period of time, and then the small particles, it will get into your belly, and then for the period of time, for long-term effect, it will affect to if the PM2.5 contains heavy metals, maybe it will cause some serious health effect. Some research shows that the trace metals frequently found in China is such as copper, magnesium, lithium, nickel, cobalt, arsenic, and selenium, and also zinc. In some countries, but it depends to when you took a sample. So it will be different between one place to another place regarding heavy metals in the PM2.5. The research also showed that in China, the PM2.5 level is 5 or until 6 times higher if you compare with the US condition. And also for the trace metals. The trace metals, they found like 20 times higher if you compare with the United States. Maybe we need to compare with our country as well. And then the health impacts of the for the particulate matter exposure. First, maybe the premature death for the vulnerable people, and then increasing the hospital admission, also increasing the emergency room visit, also increasing the attack for our children maybe, and then the chronic bronchitis, cancer, cardiovascular, diabetes, and also when you get a lot of exposure from the air pollution, it will restrict your activity, so it will affect your daily life. Okay, this is just a glance regarding the Indonesian regulation for the air pollution. I just took from the Ministry and Environment. Maybe in this I will talk in Indonesia. Ini adalah beberapa peraturan menteri dari Kementerian Lingkungan Hidup yang memang juga sudah dituliskan sebetulnya. Bila kita mengacu kepada WHO, sebetulnya ada pengukuran ataupun standar yang sudah ditetapkan, yaitu sekarang sudah turun. Kalau sebenarnya itu untuk ambient itu untuk PM2,5 itu adalah 65 mikrogram per meter cube. Tapi kalau sekarang sudah diturunkan untuk untuk annually itu sebanyak 45 mikrogram per meter cube, sedangkan untuk 24 jam itu hanya 15 mikrogram per meter cube. Sedangkan di Indonesia sendiri ini rasanya masih sangat sulit sebetulnya untuk diraih, karena sebetulnya tadi banyak sebetulnya pengaruh-pengaruh yang bisa mempengaruhi ataupun sources yang memang banyak sekali di Indonesia dan sangat beragam tentunya. Dan ini juga sangat bisa mempengaruhi keadaan ataupun kondisi udara di Indonesia, gitu ya. Kalau bisa dilihat ini kalau bisa dikonversi itu kategori itu ya, beberapa yang bisa dilihat, mungkin Anda juga nanti bisa melihatnya. Kalau kategori lebih dari 300 ataupun itu sudah mengandung 500 mikrogram per meter cube sebetulnya untuk between PM10 dan PM2.5 gitu ya. Jadi memang agak cukup besar. Dan ini kalau misalnya bisa dibilang bisa diraih beberapa saat kemarin itu memang menunjukkan bahwa PM2.5 ini cukup tinggi sebetulnya. Di sini ada beberapa Indonesian regulation sebetulnya untuk polusi udara terkait kesehatan juga terkait lingkungan hidup gitu ya. Ini juga memang sebetulnya sudah banyak sekali gitu ya tentang peraturan-peraturan seperti ini yang memang sudah diterbitkan oleh pemerintah. Harapannya memang yaitu tadi maksudnya harapannya masyarakat juga bisa mendapatkan informasi tersebut. Ini juga bisa diakses sebetulnya secara bebas dan masyarakat sebetulnya bisa melihat beberapa peraturan pemerintahan terkait polusi udara, terkait kesehatan lingkungan gitu ya, dan bagaimana juga pengaturan untuk lingkungan hidup. This is the prevention for the respiratory organ disease for air pollution. Sebetulnya ini juga saya mengambil sebetulnya apa yang sudah memang dilakukan oleh Kementerian Lingkungan Hidup dan Kementerian Kesehatan sebetulnya. Ini juga memang sudah sudah ditetapkan. Harapannya dengan adanya kegiatan ini juga kita bisa saling berbagi sebetulnya apa saja dampaknya dan preventionnya sebetulnya untuk mengurangi adanya polusi udara. Tapi perlu diingat bahwa untuk mengurangi tingkat polusi udara ini juga perlu diingat untuk semua orang di sini bahwa untuk mengurangi tingkat polusi udara itu bukan waktu yang cukup singkat. Mungkin nanti Ian akan berbicara lebih sebetulnya terkait polusi udara gitu ya dan dampaknya dan bagaimana apa yang sudah dilakukan dan sebetulnya gitu ya itu juga sudah dilakukan dalam waktu yang cukup lama gitu ya. Tidak bisa dilakukan secara singkat dan kita juga harus mencari sebetulnya sources-nya itu apa gitu ya. Yang pertama itu tadi ya kita harus melakukan edukasi sebetulnya gitu ya terkait polusi udara. Dalam artian edukasi yang positif. Apa dampaknya bagi kesehatan, apa dampaknya untuk jangka pendek dan apa sebetulnya dampak untuk jangka panjang. Banyak dari masyarakat kita yang sebetulnya masih berpikiran ataupun masih belum tahu sebetulnya dampak jangka pendeknya dan dampak jangka panjangnya apa. Nah, ini ada beberapa sebetulnya dampak jangka pendek yang sebetulnya bisa terkena oleh para warga Indonesia ataupun mungkin masyarakat sekitar terkait dari polusi udara. Dan juga ada dampak jangka panjang yang sebetulnya bisa merugikan untuk banyak orang. Seperti itu. Selain itu juga tadi ya, untuk meningkatkan strategi peningkatan kualitas udara. Nah, tadi ya, peningkatan kualitas udara itu harus datang dari kita secara pribadi. Gitu dalam artian walaupun misalnya pemerintah kita sudah memiliki misalnya beberapa rules peraturan gitu ya tapi kita juga harus berkontribusi secara positif untuk mengurangi adanya strategi peningkatan kualitas udara. Jadi dimulai dulu dari kita sebetulnya gitu ya. Ya banyak hal sebetulnya bisa dilakukan oleh kita gitu ya. Promosi kesehatan gitu ya, apa dampaknya, kesehatannya seperti apa, memeriksa kualitas udara. Nah, mungkin yang sebetulnya saya juga masih mempertanyakan gitu ya apakah aplikasi dan website ini karena setahu saya nggak tahu apakah monitoring station ini di Indonesia ini memang sudah berjalan dengan baik atau tidak. Kalau saya compare ketika saya memang sedang tinggal di Inggris itu nanti mungkin Ian akan menjelaskan mereka itu dalam satu kota memiliki banyak station monitoring yang memang sudah dipublikasikan namanya saya lupa Air apa di London nanti mungkin saya bisa discuss dengan Ian. Itu memang kalian bisa akses di website gitu ya. Jadi dalam artian itu ada sebuah aplikasi itu sesuai dengan station monitoring. Jadi memang station monitoring itu yang mengontrol di semua titik di semua kota. Dan ini juga waktunya tidak sebentar. Mereka melakukan ini juga perlu mungkin years of maybe decade gitu untuk bisa improving air quality in London. Kemudian juga mengurangi aktivitas. Jadi kalau misalnya memang di luar aktivitasnya juga memang sedang tidak baik dalam artian ya mungkin bisa dikurangi. Tapi kalau misalnya memang harus keluar, mungkin kalian bisa menggunakan masker pada saat keluar, gitu ya. Kemudian juga melakukan perilaku hidup bersih. Oke. Sebetulnya ada beberapa cara dalam mengurangi air pollution sebetulnya ya. Yang memang banyak sebetulnya bisa digunakan itu dan mungkin ini bisa dikatakan cukup efektif gitu ya karena ini juga saya mengambil research dengan beberapa peneliti di luar negeri juga dan saya juga sempat berdiskusi terkait method based solution to tackle the air pollution. Salah satunya adalah method based gitu. Saya melihat di UK itu mereka juga menggunakan green solution. Jadi mereka memang menggunakan beberapa tanaman-tanaman yang digunakan sebagai barrier. Ada beberapa yang menarik itu adalah mereka menggunakan tanaman sebagai barrier di depan sekolah. Nah ini juga dirasa sangat efektif karena bisa mengurangi sebetulnya polusi udara, gitu ya. Ini juga harganya sebetulnya cukup terjangkau, gitu ya. Kemudian ini juga terbukti dapat mengurangi partikel dan gas di beberapa tempat, terutama untuk di perkotaan, gitu ya. Selain itu juga kita dapat memonitoring air quality-nya dan ini merupakan salah satu cara memitigasi air pollution tersebut. Gitu ya. Nah ini di waktu yang sama juga sebetulnya kita dapat menggunakan tanaman tersebut sebagai bioindikator sebetulnya untuk air quality. Nah ini sebetulnya sudah banyak sekali dilakukan gitu ya. Ya mungkin ya tadi saya bilang itu juga mungkin bisa dilakukan dari kita sendiri dulu. Gitu ya. Karena jujur kalau misalnya memang sudah ada peraturannya, sudah ada rules-nya gitu ya. Tapi kalau misalnya memang kita tidak bisa memulai dari diri kita sendiri, lingkungan, masyarakat kita sendiri, keluarga dekat, itu rasanya sangat sulit gitu ya. Kalau kita menunggu hanya dari peraturan dan kemudian pemerintah bertindak, rasanya saya rasa ini juga cukup sulit. Walaupun harusnya memang ada intervensi pemerintah, tapi saya rasa itu juga mungkin harus berjalan dari kita dulu. Ya. Kemudian sebetulnya ini ada another solution, nanti juga mungkin Bu Anissa akan menambahkan terkait another solution to tackle the air pollution gitu ya. Yang pertama mungkin yang sekarang sedang digalakan oleh pemerintah adalah electric vehicles. Tapi I need to highlight the electrical vehicles because the electrical vehicles in Indonesia is expensive. Jadi tidak semua masyarakat Indonesia ini afford to buy the electrical vehicles because the electrical vehicles in Indonesia is so expensive. Itu harganya sekitar 700 sampai 800 up, yang termurah mungkin Wuling REV itu sekitar 300 sampai 350 juta. Ini tidak semua orang bisa memiliki kendaraan tersebut. Dan kemudian juga power ataupun electricity di rumah juga perlu disiapkan sebetulnya untuk memiliki kendaraan elektrik tersebut. Kemudian juga kontrol di emission. Tadi saya bilang kontrol di emission bagaimana caranya, sebetulnya sekarang juga pemerintah sudah mengupayakan beberapa regulasi untuk menggunakan beberapa emisi beberapa oktan yang cukup tinggi sebetulnya gitu ya. Harapannya ini menghasilkan gas buang yang cukup baik, tapi gas buang yang cukup baik pun itu juga dipengaruhi oleh kendaraan tersebut gitu ya. Jadi menghasilkan gas buang yang baik itu juga kendaraannya memang harus memiliki mekanisme untuk menghasilkan gas buang yang cukup baik. Kemudian reduce the number of car or motorcycle. Ini rasanya bisa dilakukan sebetulnya, tapi ini juga harus sinergi sebetulnya dengan infrastructure for public transportation. Rasanya kalau public transportation-nya juga memang belum bisa dibenahi dan belum bisa di-increase, rasanya ini tidak bisa menampung dalam artian banyaknya masyarakat di kota tersebut. Nah ini sebetulnya adalah kondisi yang seharusnya sejalan dan linear sebetulnya gitu ya. Nah ini yang perlu dilakukan. Kalau misalnya ditanya apakah ini bisa, bisa. Tapi kalau misalnya bisa dilakukan secara langsung, ini bukan proses yang instan. Kalau kita berkaca kepada beberapa negara, ini adalah proses yang cukup panjang dan kita butuh komitmen hal tersebut. Gitu ya, tadi kita bilang kita harus jalan dulu dari pribadi kita masing-masing. Soalnya satu caranya ya memang Pak, kalau di Indonesia, kalau di luar negeri mungkin cuacanya lebih enak untuk jalan kaki segala macam, jadi merasa lebih bisa pakai sepeda segala macam, sedangkan di sini misalnya masih panas. Nah itu ya itu memang ada beberapa problem terkait ya tadi kondisi. Cuman mungkin kita juga bisa increasing the infrastructure for public transport and also reduce the number of vehicles. Kalau di London nanti mungkin Ian akan bercerita tentang beberapa hal bagaimana mereka mereduksi penggunaan vehicles dalam artian private transportation, akhirnya mereka juga berpindah. Tapi tadi saya bilang itu proses yang cukup panjang, sesuatu yang sebentar sebetulnya. Oke, ini ada beberapa nature-based solution to tackle the air pollution, tapi rasanya ini juga saya mengambil dari beberapa research, dan ini juga saya ambil dari Group Center for the Clean Air Research. Mungkin yang paling banyak itu yang pertama, gitu ya, APTI-nya itu cukup tinggi. Ini APTI-nya dirasa cukup tinggi. Plant space ini adalah pohon mangga sebetulnya. Ya, pohon mangga juga dirasa sebetulnya bisa mereduksi tadi adanya air pollution sebetulnya. Ya tadi ya, untuk mengurangi beberapa exposure dari beberapa partikulat ataupun gases di Indonesia. Okay, maybe that's for my presentation. I'll give it back to Anissa. Thank you to all participants.
Thank you so much Pak Ari for your presentations. Jadi tadi Pak Ari sudah memaparkan dengan jelas tentang beberapa source of pollutants. Jadi ada indoor air, ada juga beberapa faktor-faktor yang mempengaruhi seperti angin, cuaca, dan juga aktivitas antropogenik yang ada di daerah perkotaan. Tadi juga sudah disinggung ada beberapa solusi ya Pak Ari, ada nature-based solutions. Jadi teman-teman mungkin ada yang punya pohon di rumahnya atau di halamannya, itu adalah salah satu shield atau pelindung terluar sebelum debu atau partikulat-partikulat yang tidak terlihat itu masuk ke dalam rumah. Itu adalah salah satu solusi yang paling relevan dan mungkin bisa dilakukan. Tadi juga sudah ditampilkan beberapa jenis tanaman atau pohon yang punya air pollution tolerance index yang tinggi. Jadi beberapa tanaman spesifik memiliki kemampuan untuk menyerap partikulat sehingga nantinya diharapkan tidak langsung turun. Jadi kalau misalnya ada suatu daerah atau region yang memiliki air quality yang cukup buruk, diharapkan nantinya dengan adanya kebijakan mengenai green infrastructure termasuk tree plant itu akan jadi solusi yang terbaik. Tadi juga sudah di point out ya, untuk sampai ke sana untuk mengurangi air pollution sendiri ini tidak bisa dari satu sektor saja, tapi membutuhkan beberapa multisektoral. Jadi tidak hanya mungkin dari sisi kendaraan yang mungkin dikurangi atau mungkin dari sisi industri, tapi juga termasuk dari behavior kita. Jadi misalnya mungkin kalau nanti Dr. Ian akan point out tentang beberapa solusi yang mungkin diambil di Inggris atau beberapa negara, mungkin kita akan membahas itu lebih lanjut. So if you have any questions for Pak Ari, please don't hesitate to ask in chat box. Nanti kita akan diskusi lebih lanjut di sesi berikutnya di discussion section setelah Dr. Ian Madwe. So our second speaker, so I would like to introduce our second speaker. Our second speaker is Dr. Ian Stanley Medway. Currently, he is a senior lecturer in environmental toxicology in Imperial College London. He also visiting professor in Gresham College of Environmental Health with over 20 years experience in air quality management and health effects regarding the negative impact of air pollution. He got his PhD in biochemistry in United Medical and Dental School in 1996. Dr. Ian has been at the forefront at air pollution research, also leading and contributing to a series of impactful projects and groups. So we are pleased to welcome our second speaker for today, Dr. Ian, that will talk about how effects of air pollution and clear air solution for urban areas. Lesson from London. Dr. Ian, please, you can start your presentation.
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen, always a risky business. Let's have a go. Somebody can let me know. Harry, if you could put your thumbs up if that's working, that'd be great.
That is working, Ian.
Yeah.
Oh, that is wonderful. Well, look, thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I wanted to start by really, if I can just advance this a little bit, by reflecting on the fact that I'm based in London. I'm speaking to you in Indonesia, in Jakarta. We're both very large cities. We both have air pollution problems of different scales with different sources, yes. But there's some commonality. And when Ari asked me to give the presentation, I was sent a list of 3 questions to attempt to cover in 10 to 15 minutes, yes. Health effects of urban pollution. Well, I think Ari has helped me a bit there, so I'm going to save some time there. Then the solution and preventative ways to reduce air pollution with case studies taken from across the world. Now, this is really ambitious. And so when I looked at this, I thought to myself, here's the key message I want you to take away. There is nothing massively new about the knowledge that air pollution is bad for our health. Here's the second message. We've known how to solve the problem for over 350 years. And so what I'm going to try to do is give you some sort of historical context, because London's challenges in the past are maybe quite similar to the challenges of cities in Southeast Asia today, to think about what happened in the past and what worked, what was necessary to bring about air pollution changes, and then move to the sorts of challenges we have now in terms of tackling urban air pollution, which in our context has now shifted from industrial sources and coal burning as it was in the past towards much more transport specific missions. And within that, there are some lessons which I think we can all learn. Now, last year in December 2022, it was the 70th anniversary of perhaps, we always say, the most famous, although other people will disagree, air pollution episode in air pollution science. And that was the 1952 London smog. So what I have on the right-hand panel is a photograph which is taken in the center of London in the big tourist site of Trafalgar Square at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah, so this is an air pollution episode. The air pollution is so bad that the visibility is gone. We call it a smog. smoke plus fog, and it was caused because it was really cold. December is a pretty cold month in the United Kingdom, and at the time, in order for domestic heating and industry, we were a very coal-orientated nature. So we had lots of coal fuel emissions, it was cold, and there was no wind. And so the concentration of smoke built up over London. Now, that was absolutely not unique. That happened in London a lot. It happened in all British industrial cities. It happened in all European industrialized cities, which were coal-based at this time. The reason that this was important was because for the first time, health statistics were gathered, which demonstrated that it wasn't just an air pollution episode in isolation, that it was actually having significant health effects. And that's represented in the left-hand panel. So what we have here, if I just use the laser pointer in sort of like these red diamonds, is the concentration of black smoke, which is really carbonaceous particles. Think of this as being an old way of measuring particulate matter in the air. And just see that as it gets colder, as the wind begins to die down, we begin to see this sudden increase in PM concentrations over London, and it peaks at about 1.6 milligrams per meter cubed, not micrograms. This is kind of like fire season, yes? This is the sort of those kind of levels of pollution over London. And at the time, that was associated with another pollutant which increased dramatically over London, which is represented with these blue triangles, which is sulfur dioxide. And there is a story here, which is a story which has pertinence today. The reason there's so much SO2 associated with this coal burning is because at this point, post the Second World War, the United Kingdom was in a deep economic recession. And so all of the high-grade coal was being sold to the external market, and all of the really cheap, high-sulfur, low-grade coal was being maintained for the domestic market. So the pollution has to be seen within the framework of the economics of the time. Now, this is a very bad air pollution episode. This is the important data represented by these green squares. This is the daily death rate in London over this period. And you can see it tracks the peaks in air pollution over this period of time. And if you integrate the number of excess deaths occurring over this period, well, the number somewhere between 4,200 to 4,500 individuals dying over this period of 5 days because of this episode. And if you look even more carefully at this graph, you'll see that even after the episode has ended, the death rate stays elevated to how it was before the episode. And this daily rate of deaths doesn't go down to the normal rate for about another 2 months. And if you integrate the number of people who die during the event and the number of people who die in the 2 months after the event, the number goes up to around 11,000 deaths. So here you have the first definitive evidence that there is an air pollution event caused by combustion in an urban environment, resulting demonstrably in excess deaths. So what do you think the United Kingdom did about this? Well, I'll tell you, the government weren't particularly keen at the time to do anything about it at all. And the arguments, again, have resonance, not only for the United Kingdom, but for all governments internationally. And that's that they saw this as being very unfortunate, but they were concerned about the economic impacts on the economy of dealing with the emission sources. And so the economy was always being balanced against public health issues. Now, other lessons we can begin to take from this event 70 years ago, yes, some of which weren't appreciated at the time. Now, who dies? And what did they die of? Two really fundamental questions, and it's something we should always ask, even when we talk about contemporary air pollution. This is a really simple piece of data. What they did is they looked at the death rates in the week before the episode and the death rate in the week after the episode, and they stratified it by the age of the population who were dying. So here we have very young infants all the way through to people who are relatively old. And what you can see is the people who are dying, well, there's a almost threefold increase in death rates in individuals who the textbooks describe as being old and infirmed, but what I think is fairer to say is are on the second part of middle age to age, yes? So the older age group, but from about 45 years, seem to be vulnerable. And that's about the point in time you begin to see underlying cardiovascular risks beginning to emerge within the population. And the other group, completely ignored at this point in time when it happened in the 1950s, but when you draw through the data, you can see a particularly vulnerable are infants. Yes, again, a twofold increase. So all the way back then, we already knew that there were probably early life effects occurring as a consequence of these air pollution exposures. And actually, we can dig even further deeper into it. A lot of the reports which were published at the time disappeared into government reports and set on shelves for years. They're not science papers by any means, but you can work out that if you go through the data published, and this was February 1953, so we're only talking about 2.5 months after the events, they had worked out that the people who were dying of bronchitis. They were dying of heart disease. People sometimes say we didn't know about the heart disease link until the 1990s. Well, it's here in the 1950s. And the other interesting one here, which is really pertinent to a discussion of air pollution today, is the other group of individuals who seem to be dying were people who had infectious disease. So again, all the way back here, it's suggesting that air pollution is increasing the vulnerability of the population to infectious disease risk. So there are some key lessons there. Now, although the government wasn't very keen, in the United Kingdom, MPs are able to suggest pieces of legislation independent of what the government wanted. They're called private members' bills. And this is a private members' bill which changes the landscape. So the government do another thing governments always do when they're charged with changing something. They sit down and they have a conversation about it, and they have meetings about it, and they write reports. A report was commissioned, but it was a really good one by Hugh Beaver, yes? And it was really short, very focused, and it said that something had to be done about the problem. And it was taken up by a politician who was not, I would say, one of the most morally upright politicians the United Kingdom has ever generated. And we've got some pretty good ones to pick from. Here we have Gerald Nabarro, and he introduced the legislation of the UK's Clean Air Act. And that was then taken through Parliament, and it introduced laws which banned coal combustion, banned by law coal combustion within the urban area of London, and moved electrical generation with coal out of the city to areas where people did not live. Now, interestingly, the Beaver Committee report said, in order to achieve this, you needed to give something back to the population to take them on that journey. And so a whole series of subsidies were given to industry, but also to individuals to allow them to transmit their fuel usage from coal to alternative provision. And so this piece of legislation in 1956 is really the world's first substantial piece of air quality regulation. And for me, there's a core message. We can talk about many ways in which we can improve air pollution. The single most effective historical way of doing it is by passing laws to ensure that all the new technologies or the emission sources have to change. All the persuasion in the world doesn't seem to really change a lot until there's legal sort of muscle behind it. Now, because of this, air pollution in London, in the United Kingdom, and throughout Europe, because Europe took up some of these things, as did the North America, fell. So coal combustion became an insignificant issue for us by the time we got through to the 70s and the 80s. And clearly that's not the case elsewhere in the world. So we do have lessons to learn. But air pollution doesn't go away. It often simply changes. And what we saw within Europe is as we moved away from pollution related to industry, because much of our industry moved out of the United Kingdom to other countries. As we moved away from coal for power generation, we also saw a transition to a much more car-centric society. And so we began to see changes in the emissions and a much more traffic-dominated profile. Now, the concentrations were lower, much lower than they historically were in the past with coal combustion. But we were still seeing significant health effects associated with air pollution in our city. And it wasn't just particulates. And I think Ari was intimating this earlier on. In Europe, we have a particular and had a particular problem with dieselization of our vehicle fleet. Much of our fleet from about the mid-90s moved to diesel as an attempt to reduce CO2 emissions to meet sort of like climate change targets. It was probably a mistake, I think, in retrospect, to put so much emphasis on diesel. And so we ended up with diesel particulates, but also nitrogen dioxide, a gas which is also co-emitted from diesel engines in our cities. And that for us in London became a significant problem. The other thing which has changed, and I've kind of intimated we knew a bit about this before, but it's worth reflecting, is that we now have much more information that tells us that air pollution not only makes ill people sicker, it creates illness in the population. It's such a key message to get through to people who are well and young, that they may not feel the physical effects of air pollution today, but they are probably storing up damage which is going to make them more vulnerable to chronic disease as they age. And some of those effects are happening in the womb, and some of those effects are happening very early in the life course in terms of suboptimal organ development. The other thing which is new, and I think changes the debate about how urgent it is to deal with air pollution, globally, and particularly in developing nations where you're seeing this tremendous increase in life expectancy, is the new evidence that air pollution is linked to mental health and to dementia risk. So I would argue all those big numbers Ari mentioned before are about to become relatively underestimating the true effect once we begin in the risk of dementia and mental health. So if you think those numbers are unbelievable now, they're going to get bigger, they're not going to get smaller as these other health factors are functioned in. Now, this is from London. I think London is interesting, yes. I look at it this way. My studies are based in London. The studies we do are based in London mostly. And our air pollution levels are much lower than yours, yes? Except for NO2. Our NO2 concentrations, you know, we rank up there. So if we see effects in London, you're going to see them, yes, in more polluted cities globally. It's not quite as simple as looking at our effects and multiplying them by the difference in the concentration, but expect them to be present in your population. Now, I've just put out a few things from the London population now, which we see happening to illustrate that air pollution, even when it's at a much lower level, needs to be dealt with. This is a study which is looking at over 500,000 new births within London over a period of about a decade. And what it shows is that we have lower for term birth weights of children in relation to the exposures of their mother during pregnancy to all the usual suspects, NO2, PM2.5, but particularly the PM2.5 component, which is associated with the exhaust fraction. So even within England, with all our traffic, with all our regulations, we still have a problem. And other countries will not avoid this problem because the human animal is very similar wherever it is. People talk about our genetic differences. We're more alike than we are different. And these risks propagate equally across the globe. The other thing which we see in London, and again, is seen globally, particularly I think in countries which are at the moment suffering from sort of wildfire or burning of type events, sudden high particulate events, is an increase in asthma incidents or respiratory symptoms in the population. Now, again, our issues in London are small compared with many of the issues in the Southeast Asia. But this data is just looking at consultations with GPs in a central London borough. So we're looking at a population of around 600,000 individuals. And it just shows that, for example, here, if you look at NO2, if there's an NO2 event on the day of the event, the day after, for the 2 days after, and for the week after, we see dramatic increases in people seeking primary and secondary health care because they are suffering from respiratory complications related to their asthma. And that happens today, and this data is relatively good. Now, we can collect this data because we have a fully sort of computerized primary healthcare data set, so we can access it, but it makes the point, yes, that we have these issues. And then the other thing, and this is a piece of work I did almost 10 years ago, but we're following it up at the moment, is that the air pollution in our cities affects really has a profound effect on the health of our children as they grow up in a city. This is a study we did in 2 inner London boroughs. They're called Tower Hamlets and Hackney, and these little images here are the kind of schools we visited. Now, what's interesting about London is very diverse in terms of its ethnic population. And in these 2 boroughs, the majority of the population are actually of Bangladeshi, Southeast Asian descent, yes? So we're really looking at a Bangladeshi population. It's mostly Bangladeshi, and then actually we're split between sort of our black population, which is largely from West Africa in this area, and a sort of white population. But the white population isn't the dominant population here at all. But if you go to this area, it's incredibly poor. It has very bad air pollution for London. And I can illustrate that here. Again, I'm focusing on NO2. NO2 is just telling us something about the sort of diesel exhaust cocktail coming out of the tailpipe. What I've got here is a map of NO2 concentrations, an annual map for one of the years, 2009. And at the time this map was drawn, the European legal limit for NO2 as an annual average was 40 micrograms per meter cubed, which meant in 2009, the whole of central London was illegal in terms of its NO2 concentration. Now, bear in mind that in September 2021, based on a whole host of evidence, the WHO's guideline for annual NO2 was actually reduced from 40 to 10. So actually NO2 stays really critical as a pollutant we have to look at, both because it's toxic in its own right, but because it's a good proxy of exhaust emissions, particularly from diesel vehicles. Why does this matter? This is a very dry piece of data, but it's on around 2,000 children. And what we're looking at here is the impact of their exposure to NO2 per unit, this is per unit, per microgram per meter cubed of NO2, on the change in lung volume based on their short-term exposures and their long-term exposures. Well, the short-term exposures make no difference to their lung volume, and there are 2 dots here based on their exposures at home or their weighted exposures at home and at school. But if you look at the long-term annual exposures, what you see is a significant reduction in lung volume, and it's around 2.5 mils per microgram per NO2, which means in London, because of the mean NO2 concentration being around 50, our children by the age of 8 and 9 have already lost around 120 mils of lung volume, around 5%. Now that's really critical, because although it won't produce symptoms in those children now, reaching your peak lung volume in adulthood is a really strong predictor of your life expectancy, but also your vulnerability to chronic disease as we age. Some other things. We've looked at the other side of the mixture. This is data I published last year using the UK Biobank. Again, it's 500,000 individuals. This is looking at older people. It's simply making the point that when you get old, you don't just get one disease, you get multiple diseases. And the multiple diseases we get are absolutely related to the long-term exposures to pollutants that we breathe. And here we begin to pull out things which are associated with air pollution that we haven't historically talked about. Neurological regions, respiratory and cardiovascular are there as well, but mental health is there. Also, gastrointestinal issues, a whole host of diabetes and hypertension is also present within the United Kingdom, although probably not at the extent it is in Indonesia at the present moment in time. So there's lots of bad stuff, yes? Air pollution is absolutely bad for our health. Here's the positive news. Laws and regulation reduce it, and where laws and regulations are impacted, you get health benefits. This is a study from North America looking at children, and it's 3 cohorts which ran between sort of like the early 90s to the 1920s. And these are, in this cohort, are the percentage of children down here in this shaded area with clinically small lungs. And what you can see is as air pollution improves in the United States, the number of children with clinically small lungs falls by over half. The reductions produce benefits to the population. In London currently, we are now in the midst of our ultra-low emission zone to reduce emissions. Again, these are instruments, taxation, laws, which penalize drivers who drive into the city in vehicles which do not meet particular emission classes. Politically, it's very challenging to introduce these laws. They have worked. In the center of the city, they have produced the largest changes in NO2 we have ever seen because of a public policy, not by persuasion, but by actually law and enforcement. And again, I think that sometimes we have to embrace the fact that these things change in that respect. This is our low emission zone. It's the whole of the city. And that's the other thing I think we have to realize about dealing with air pollution. It cannot be dealt with on the micro scale. If you want to improve air pollution at a city scale, it has to be the whole city. It probably also has to be the satellite conurbations around that city. Small hotspot type studies really are sticking plasters on a wound. They are not dealing with the challenge that we need to face. And then finally, here are some reports. They are in English. I apologize. They're a bit centric, but they are important for a number of reasons. A, they're freely available online, so anybody can download them and read them. But these two reports on the Every Breath We Take and this report, which we just published about a couple of months ago, really focus on the fact that air pollution affects the whole life course. And I think it's important that people see that in the round and their current reviews. And then our chief medical officer's entire annual report last year was based on air pollution. And importantly, half of this report is based on mitigation and the way in which mitigation can be delivered through policy politically and the challenges which will be caused at that sort of political, economic, social interface. And so I'd encourage anybody interested in these debates to access these reports. And then finally, this is my final thing. I said at the beginning that we have known all of this for over 360 years. And I'm not making it up. This is a very old pamphlet, which was published in 1661 by a scholar in the United Kingdom. His name was John Evelyn. He was one of the founding members of the Royal Society, with Isaac Newton, with Christopher Wren, with Hooke, with Boyle. And he published this treatise in 1661 on what London could do about its air pollution problem to improve its image and to improve the health of the population. And how about these? These are his suggestions, okay? Get ready. We needed to use cleaner fuels. They were, okay. We needed to separate populations from the pollution sources. He argued that if we did this, rather than costing money, it would save money because you'd have a healthier, happier, more productive workforce. He argued that cities needed green infrastructure, yes, both to make them more attractive to industry, but also to protect the population from air pollution. So all the things we talk about now, they were already being talked about. They were already solutions 362 years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ian, for your great and insightful presentations. Dr. Ian has mentioned about disease related to air pollutions, including asthma and also children and elders susceptible populations regarding the bad air quality. And also Dr. Ian have mentioned about it's not enough to just put an intervention in the small scales, but it needs city scales, including maybe the regulations that apply in the national scales. So we have several questions from the audience. So for the first questions from, okay, can you, apakah bisa ditampilkan pertanyaannya? Yeah, we have several questions from our audience. The first questions from Virus Patika Ramadhani. Oh, I think it's similar questions with the second questions from Ibu Ratna Dwi Puji Astuti. It's about is it worth it if we use electric vehicle? As we know that some of the advertisement to reduce air pollutions, one of the thing that we can do is buy and use the electrical vehicles. We all know that developing countries like Indonesia still use non-renewable energy like coal. Maybe this case will be benefit in developed countries like UK. And how about the regulation to use mask in the outdoor? Is it effective to prevent health problems? Should we use mask every day during the high concentrations of particulate matters? So first, maybe about is it worth it to use the electric vehicle, and maybe about the using mask. Maybe for the first, maybe Dr. Ari, you can ask the question for me. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Anissa. Thank you, and that is a good presentation. Sorry, still okay. Regarding the electricity vehicles in Indonesia, I think it's not the effective solution because first, in Indonesia, we're still generating electricity using the coal because the coal is the biggest sources to generate the electricity in Indonesia. Second, the electricity vehicle in Indonesia is still expensive. So not all of the Indonesian citizens can buy the electricity vehicles because it's too expensive. I think we need to, I don't know, maybe Ian have a lot of comparison or insight regarding electricity in the UK, because most of the Indonesian people, they still using their own transportation. So I think for the electricity currently it's not effective because first the price is too expensive. Not all of Indonesian people can afford and buy for the electricity vehicle, and then the second, the electricity power generation in Indonesia, we're still using the coal. So I don't know, in my insight or in my opinion, maybe the government need to switch the electricity operation. Maybe they can use the renewable energy, or maybe they can use another sources, not using the coal for generate the electricity. Maybe that's from me. Maybe Ian, maybe you can have insight regarding the electricity condition. And then is that effective? We are using the electricity vehicle.
So what I would one of the things which always makes me pull my hair out is when people describe electric vehicles as being zero pollution. They are not. Yes, they palpably are not. They just make different types of pollution. You deal with tailpipe, but even if you deal with tailpipe, you have to deal with how you're generating electricity. So again, this is a bigger issue in that you have to see your pollution reduction strategy within a wider energy solution for your country, which also means you have to see it in your wider national commitments to net zero targets. Yes, and we all know how fluid they are easy to sign up on paper, very difficult to deliver. The other thing I'd say is that it's undoubtedly the case that there are significant technological innovations coming online. Politicians love technological solutions because it means hopefully somebody will come along and prevent them from having difficult decisions. It has never worked, yes, without regulation. If we introduce electric vehicles, they have to be cheap enough for people to use, which probably means subsidies, yes, but also nobody will, people hate change. People like doing what they have always done, yes? So you have to create an environment where people will adopt the new technologies. And the only way of doing that is through a combination of persuasion, which I think is the minor component. And the other part is regulation, where people begin to see that it's beneficial in the long term because it's cheaper for them. But for our cities, one of the challenges we have, especially in cities which are emerging, is designing them better so that we need fewer private journeys and we have better transport infrastructure for mass transit. And that is very difficult, and it takes a lot of integration across numerous government departments.
Yeah, and I agree. And it takes a long time to get the better infrastructure. Yeah. In Indonesia, we're still struggling to increase the infrastructure, especially for the transportation. Yeah, we learned from the UK. I think UK has a lot of. I mean, like if we compare, like maybe 10 or 20 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, UK is still developing for the infrastructure for the transportation.
And all of these challenges are scalable, yes. So if you have a city of 10 million, it's a problem. If you have a city of 20 to 30 million, it's a bigger problem, yes. If your city has got a static population, it's one issue. If your population is increasing dramatically and you've got still a significant rural to urban shift happening in an economy which is still growing, our economy doesn't grow, it sort of limps along. So, I mean, I think you have to understand that people on a different countries and different cities are in different positions in this evolution, yes. The challenge we have is how you deal with that difference when actually damage is being done to health now, and we have to deal with the climate emergency right at this moment. Otherwise, we're not really going to be in a great place in 20 years. And so difficult decisions have to be made. And I will say the developed world and the developed economies and the traditional economies really have to step up and pay for some of this infrastructure to be delivered in other countries in order to control the global emission profile. Otherwise, it will never happen.
Yeah, it's a great point from Pak Ari and Dr. Ian. So maybe for the electric vehicle, it's a great solution, but not just directly applied to the general population, especially Indonesia with great populations. So how about the audience asked about, should we wear masks every day if the air quality is getting bad, or how you see this? They using masks. Maybe Dr. Ian?
So the masks that people wear are not going to protect them from the very fine particles in air pollution because they're not the right grade. You'd have to almost have an occupational industrial face mask with a really tight seal, and the seals are very difficult to maintain in daily life. So I think that the mask solution doesn't work in the way that people think it works. They get confused because they're very good for infectious transmission because air droplets are quite large, but they're not very good for filtering out particles. They might be quite good at dealing with some reactive gases, yes? So there might be some benefit, but I think there's a danger with them, and the danger is they create a false sense of security. So not only do they not quite work as well as people think they do, but the people wearing them feel as though in some sense they've protected themselves, and so probably take less behavioral modification changes to reduce their exposures. Yes, they feel more capable of going on busy roads because they've got their face mask on. So the messaging around this has to be really very, very careful and nuanced. I think it's better to focus on cleaner air in public and civic buildings, yes, rather than the individual on the way to those buildings. So, for example, I think schools should have filters and HEPA filters to ensure that the air in the schools is as clean as it can possibly be, because that delivers the benefit to all of the children and all of the staff within that school, yes, and that can be regulated. Whereas face masks are a little bit, who controls the market? Who controls the standards of those face masks? People will end up buying face masks based on their design to make themselves look good rather than on whether they actually work, because that's what humans are like, yes? So I think that it's not something I would advocate, but I can see a way in which they'd be useful for, say, some NO2 emissions, would be quite useful for some VOCs. But then, of course, they are collecting them, and you'd have to make sure you decontaminate them on a regular basis.
Right. How about Pak Ari? Do you have some points, or you agree?
I agree with Ian, because a lot of people in Indonesia, they're misunderstanding about the mask, about the type of the mask. I agree with Ian. Some of the people in Indonesia, they're buying a mask for look good. They're not using what is the function of the mask. And then I agree. Some of this elementary school, maybe they just create the good environment. And as I mentioned before, some of the environment, maybe you can create like natural spray solution or using the HEPA filters, that is maybe it's more effective in Indonesia as well. Because, but for your information as well, I don't know. I think it's more in the UK as well. Most of their school they are close to the main road, Ian. Like maybe it's like 5 until 10 meters close to the main road. So that's the reason. Maybe a lot of indoor pollution coming from the outdoor as well, from the ventilation, something like that. Yeah, but I agree with the mask. Maybe it's not the most effective ways. A lot of Indonesian people, they misunderstand regarding the size of the type of the mask. They just maybe thinking about, maybe not all of them Indonesia, not all Indonesia, maybe some of them, they misunderstanding about the type of the mask itself. Maybe that's it, Anissa, for me. Maybe you can go ahead to third question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ian and Pak Ari. We'll move to the next questions. A questions from Nafira Leni Silraini. I think it's quite same with the fifth questions from Asi. So recently, some Indonesian media say that the government will use the water mist spraying from plant or the high building to reduce the air pollution. Can this method will be an effective and efficient step or solution to overcome this issue? And also from ASI, in the past, how the UK can mitigate its handle to this problem. In China, the evidence they combat air pollution with water mist, and how UK can handle it efficiently by integrate the regulation between environmental issue, industries, and health, because the climate change is inevitable. So you have, maybe for the first, Pak Ari, you can answer the questions from both of our audience.
Okay, I think for the mist, I think last week or maybe a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, it happens in Jakarta, Ian. So the government create to spray a lot of mist in the ambient air in Jakarta, and then I don't know the effective of this method, but in my opinion, I think it's not effective. Maybe it only lasts for an hour. Maybe, in my opinion, it only lasts for an hour. But I agree with you. We have to tackle the air pollution from the sources. This is one of the issue in Indonesia. The government they're using the mist to spread and then reduce the air pollution. But in my opinion, I think this is only last for an hour. This is not last for a day, maybe, or maybe a week. This is a more short-term episode, I think. In my opinion, I don't know. Maybe Ian, you have a comment for this.
I'm a really old cynic, yes, and I have a fundamental view, which, if it sounds wild and funky, it probably doesn't work. And also, the second question I would say is, where does it go? So what are you doing? Okay, so we know when it rains. Yes, we know when you have heavy rain, it drags the particulate out of the environment, but it's still retained in the environment to be resuspended at a later date. Yes, by, you know, the city's movements, by traffic movements. So you're not really, my concern is these things, and we have done similar things within the United Kingdom. In fact, we've done even wilder things. We've attempted to glue the particles to the ground, for goodness sake, in some of our studies. They are always done near places where air pollution is being monitored as a mechanism not to protect public health, but to improve the measurements, yes, so that it looks as though better things are happening. You know, by all means, if it rained 365 days a year and we pumped enough water into the atmosphere, we could probably clean out most of the particles, but you would end up with a significant water problem in your country. So, I mean, you know, the solution still says that essentially you have to stop the emissions, yes? And ultimately, there is this danger, isn't there, that actually the people making the emissions should be paying for the removal of their emissions. It shouldn't be your government per se paying out a general taxation so that every man, woman, and child in our countries is paying to solve the pollution which is being created by somebody else. So I think these are always a mistake, because it's kind of, we would say it's kicking the can down the road, avoiding having to make difficult decisions at that interface between business, the economy, and public health.
Thank you, Ian and Pak Ari, for your point of view. So for the water spraying is not an effective way to reduce the air. Of course, because particle itself can transport to another, it's because the mobility of the particles. And yeah, I think also it's not a good options to take. So for the question number 4, I think it's quite same. Yeah, I think it's already answered by both of our speakers. So we'll move to this another questions. Can we have another questions, please?
It's number 5.
It's already
What is the same?
the question. Okay, the next question from Ibu Alfi Purwati to Dr. Ian Madwe. Nowadays, we as the community in Jogja City feel the chaos of domestic waste because the landfill has been full. So many urban people burn their waste to be the solution. This case increase the air pollution. In this case, what should people do when they have no other solution? I think it's complex. What is your opinion on these matters? Thank you. I think this question is directly to Dr. Ian.
Is it complex? Yeah, it's really complex, yes, because every country and every community have their problems. It's the issue of integration, yes. You have to integrate urban design, and urban design includes how you deal with waste, yes. And you have to deal with waste, and what you cannot do is abrogate the responsibility for that waste by hoping that your public will make it disappear. Yes, because I can guarantee that the sort of things which are probably being burnt, let's admit it's probably going to be quite a lot of plastics, quite a lot of material which doesn't biodegrade within the environment, yes, are going to create local emissions which are going to have profound effects on health, which are not really represented by the way in which we measure air pollution. So again, if this was happening in the United Kingdom would ban it, yes. But then who carries the cost? Yes, you then have to have a very serious discussion about how you handle waste, and I don't know how that is handled in Indonesia, and the extent to which that is, the story of waste is a really interesting thing. Yes, the whole story of air pollution could sometimes be framed as most of our problems come from individuals converting waste material into profit. Yes, but one of the things we often forget is one of the profit areas of waste is making that waste disappear. Yes, from everybody's view. If that part of the economy and that economic cycle or that cycle of products isn't handled correctly, and that isn't built into the way in which we build our cities, you're going to have problems. And what you have outlined in number 5, I would frame that as being a failure in public policy.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ian, for the answer. So the next questions from Bapak Ardi, in the areas with a high exposure to air pollution, such as residential area near the factories, who should be prioritized for surveillance to measure the impact of air pollution? And what is the ideal time frame for conducting surveys after the establishment of the factory? So it's related to industrial pollution, I guess. Maybe Dr. Ian, you can have these questions.
Who should be prioritized? The vulnerable. There's a tendency, I don't know, it's certainly a tendency within Europe, yes, that we monitor areas where we think pollution is going to be high, and we forget to monitor pollution where people actually live. Yes, I'm a big advocate for putting your monitoring near the factory, near the highest population density. So what you're talking about is the pollution from the factory and its impact on the population as opposed to at buffer distances. So I think that's important. What is the ideal time frame? Well, before, during, and after the new industrial process goes in, and how long before will depend on how many other things are changing in your local environment. But one thing I think is absolutely fundamental, which is the industries themselves must have absolutely no role, say, jurisdiction and oversight over the environmental data that is being collected. They cannot be picking the consultancies to do it. This has to be done in a fully independent manner, because if it's not done in a fully independent manner, you will not carry public trust forward, and people will always believe that the people who are doing the monitoring are doing it on the behest of economic agents who are controlling the narrative. So I think it's not just when you do it, where you're monitoring it, it's ensuring that it's completely independent from the industry themselves.
Thank you, Dr. Ian. So I will translate. So, poin dari Dr. Ian adalah tentu saja sama seperti poin sebelumnya, tentu saja harus memisahkan populasi dari sumber polutan. In this case adalah industrial area. Tentu saja wilayah-wilayah industri tidak boleh didekatkan, ataupun pemukiman penduduk tidak boleh mendekat di sekitar area industri, baik itu pabrik ataupun PLTU. Thank you, Ian, for your point. How about Pak Ari? Do you have any point regarding these questions?
I think that's enough from Ian. Maybe I will answer it for the question number 7, I think. Okay. To Raju, yeah, thank you for your question. I think we need to divide it from the solution. We need the short-term solution and the long-term solution. And also regarding the electricity vehicles that we've previously mentioned in the first question, I think it's the same answer for the electric vehicles, but I agree. For the short period of time, maybe we need to focusing on the law and the enforcement to our government and also for the public as well. And then we need, maybe we can shifting for the fuels and then also for the using the public transport. But maybe I think it's not applicable to all of the cities. Yeah, Ian mentioned it will affect to how many people in that city and then how many people stay in that area, and then how about the infrastructures? It will cover all of the population or not? I think that the short-term solution, I think that we can use in Indonesia for kind of time. Yeah, maybe that's from me. Maybe Anissa, you can add more regarding the solution.
Thank you, Pak Ari.
In terms of number 7,
yeah,
there's just one thing I'd say, which is you need to do both. Clearly, you need to do both. But history would say in the United Kingdom, we've very much signed up to very long-term ambitions and done very short-term things because they're very symbolic and they look as though you're doing something, yes? If you're going to have long-term objectives, you need to have milestones. And you need to say, in 5 years, we will be here. In 10 years, we will be here. In 15 years, we will be here, yes? And there has to be evaluation of the movement towards those milestones. And it's not criticism of the Indonesian government, because the United Kingdom have signed up for a whole host of things and are currently being taken to court by people who are saying, you've signed up to targets in 2050, but you have no pathway or staged milestones on the pathway to do it. And it's very easy to have long-term goals if you aren't actually actively pursuing them from the moment you set them. So in a sense, the short-term goals are part of the long-term solution, but only if they're built into the long-term solution as milestones towards your desired end.
Thank you, Ian, for your answer. I think the last questions from Ibu Maya Wijayanti to Dr. Ian Madwe. In reducing urban air pollution, what are the effective policy strategies for this issue without hampering economic growth? And what is the role of the business sector in reducing urban air pollution? How can companies implement sustainable practice to reduce their negative impact on the environment?
companies instigate policies which are sustainability policies when they have to, yes, when there are regulations in place which they have to adhere to. And generally speaking, from my experience of dealing with the business community, they are very proactive in doing it as long as the same rules apply to everybody and the enforcement of those rules are equitable. In fact, very often, those rules and regulations create an environment for innovation of new solutions. So I do see them as being part of the solution, but they're business, so they will only do it if the landscape suggests they have to do it, or if they can see some financial benefit. And often there are financial benefits along the way. The issue about economic growth is something which we are reflecting a great deal on in Europe at the present moment in time. And there is a very active debate going on, which is around GDP. Yes. And what GDP actually means and why we have decided as a society to use GDP as our measure of success and happiness, because that's effectively what we have done as societies, yes. And whether actually we need to think a bit more holistically about what economic growth really means in terms of the overall happiness, health, and well-being of the populations in our societies. And in fact, maybe chasing very large GDP numbers are actually counter to the long-term health of our populations. And actually, we need to think about how we incorporate that disbenefit into those calculations so that governments don't chase after very rapid economic growth now, only to pick up significant health costs down the stream, which will dwarf the short-term economic benefits now. And that, again, requires a very long-term view, which is often not what we see politically, because people are obsessed with the cycle, the electoral cycle in their various countries. But nevertheless, I think we do have to have a serious debate about what is sustainable economic growth that benefits the majority of the people, as opposed to very rapid economic growth, which from our experience in the West seems to benefit very few.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ian, for your answer. One more point, this regarding to nature-based solutions that Pak Ari mentioned before. So some solutions from the previous research, they talk about the effective ways to reducing air pollution is by growing the trees. I mean, the specific trees maybe that sensitive, like mango or acacia. I think, do you have any comments regarding this? Or maybe is this one of the great solution that maybe we can do for like in the small scales? So maybe for the questions is for Pari. What do you see about the nature-based solutions?
I think I can say that this is the effective ways, but we can try and then we can learn from many countries that they using the natural base to make some infrastructure or maybe the building more greener and then tackle the air pollution. We can learn from many countries like UK and then maybe Singapore. They're using the same things, and then we can apply it because we have a lot of sources regarding the green sources in Indonesia, and then maybe we can produce it. Some of them, I think, in Jakarta, I think some buildings they trying to reduce the air pollution and they're using the green areas. And then they just plant the plantation in front of the building and also in the school. I think it's not the best thing and the best ways. But maybe we have to control. I think we have to see in the next maybe year or maybe the second year, and then maybe we can evaluate regarding our plan to planting the plantation in front of area.
Thank you, Fari, because one of the NGO have mentioned that planting trees is not efficient. Of course, for the short period of time, it's not efficient. But maybe, Dr. Ian, do you have any points regarding these solutions?
People love the idea, I think, that Mother Nature is going to come and save us from our sins. Yes, and we have to be careful that we control the narrative here. We have many overlapping issues. We have climate issue, we have a biodiversity issue globally. So I think urban greening needs to be seen in the round. Urban greening is important for urban cooling. Yes, absolutely. Urban greening is necessary to maintain mental well-being and biodiversity within our urban environments. I think that's important. We sometimes overstate the impact it has on air pollution without tackling sources. And there are a few little cautionary notes. Not all plants are good. Yes, some of the plants potentially release VOCs that in hot countries of a high level of solar radiation will actually cause secondary organic pollution. So pick your plants carefully, but I would always be an advocate for the fact that our cities need to be green to make them nice places for our families to grow up in, and they solve more than just the air pollution problem.
Thank you, Pak Ari, and also Dr. Ian for your point of view. I think that was the last questions, and no more questions from our audience. I think I need to, for the discussion, it's very happy to that students have so many questions regarding this topic. So if we talk about the urban air pollution, it's not enough for only just the policy that happened in just 1 or 2 years, but we have specific ones like Dr. Ian mentions. It's like a great movement by all, not only the government, but all the peoples in the country. So I think that's all from our discussions. That's the end of our discussions. Thank you very much. I'll give it back to Bu Aini. Thank you.
And before we are closing, I would like to say thank you to Ian for joining us today. On behalf of the Department of Health, Behavior, and Social Medicine, we would like to say thank you. And then hopefully you can joining us today and then give more knowledge regarding the air pollution, as you are an expert in the UK as well, and then more insight to our student in our university and our department and our community in Indonesia. Thank you, Ian, for joining us today. Hopefully we can see in another few years, and then maybe we can talk more regarding the air pollution. Thank you, Ian.
No problem. Thank you very much for inviting me, and have a good remainder of the day. Take care.
Yeah, you too. I heard that you will go to the Parliament at 3 p.m. this morning.
Yes, I've forgotten about that, but I will be going to Parliament at 3 o'clock. I have to think about what I'm going to say.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. And say, thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all of the ERG members in the UK.
I'll pass on you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much to all the speakers to shed light on us about the topic of air pollution, and we learned so much about it today. And thank you, Mr. Ari and Dr. Ian. And last but not least, thank you very much, Dr. Anissa, for bringing us a very productive session today. And ladies and gentlemen, you can download the presentation today in the chat box, in the link in the chat box. And now we'd like to invite you to join us in the online photo session. So please turn on your camera. Bapak Ibu, saat ini kita akan melaksanakan sesi foto online, jadi dimohon untuk menyalakan kamera Anda masing-masing. Oke, kepada panitia yang bertugas, boleh minta tolong untuk didokumentasikan. 1, 2, dan 3. Oke, sekali lagi. 1, 2, dan 3. Oke, terima kasih. Dan ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to the closing session of today's Wednesday webinar. And on behalf of organizing committee, we would like to say thank you, and also sorry if there are any mistake in our program today. And stay safe and stay healthy, and also have a great day ahead. See you in the next Wednesday webinar. I am Aini Aziza signing off. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.